Previously, Fred and Ellis walked east, joined briefly by Marin of the Third Quiet Eye. But their presence stirred more than curiosity, it triggered pursuit. In Eddystone Flats, they uncovered a buried fragment pulsing with memory, looping time and rewriting perception. As agents closed in, reality bent. Fred and Ellis emerged changed, carriers of something older than language. Now, the world watches. And the watchers are no longer silent. Chapter 35, Pulse Signal. The state line into Indiana was disguised as a crumbling bridge over a dry riverbed. No signs. No cameras. Just broken pavement and the distant hum of something metallic limping behind them. Fred led. Ellis limped, not injured, just off. Something wasn't sinking. The SUVs returned, 3 this time, black and identical, tires designed for silence. Fred didn't look back, he listened. Heard the alternators spin in real time. He mapped their drive paths mid-run, calculating terrain, friction, momentum. Then he acted. Slashed through a rusted fence into an abandoned nursery. Skidded beneath a gutted greenhouse. Planted a broken shovel like a tripwire, one SUV buckled into the earth. Ellis coughed. His skin had begun to pale and vibrate. Fred caught him near an overturned wheelbarrow, eyes sharp. This place resonates. You're absorbing it. Ellis's fingers twitched like antennae. Nearby soil pulsed with emotion, grief, anger, lost childhoods packed in petunias. This ground remembers, Ellis whispered. And I remember too much of it. Fred carried him out. Not because Ellis was weak, but because Fred was designed to endure what others weren't meant to hold. They escaped through a field of wind-churned dandelions. One SUV followed. The others didn't, they had stalled, machines choking on unresolved memory. Chapter 36, Tangent Blood. They stopped outside a diner with solar panels crooked on the roof. Michigan gone, Indiana behind them, Ohio next. Ellis slept inside, curled in a booth. Fred ordered a coffee. The waitress stared long, he didn't blink. Outside, a woman screamed. Something about a missing boy. A vanished trailer. Fred stood. Walked out. Followed a trail of glass leading into a collapsed barn. Inside, a boy, maybe 9, clutching a silver radio that hummed songs in languages no one spoke. Fred knelt. Did you fix it? The boy nodded. Didn't speak. Fred lifted the radio. It vibrated like Ellis's hands had, days ago. Fred touched his own wrist. For the first time, his pulse stuttered. Back at the diner, Ellis was awake, tapping his fork against a glass. You felt it, he said. That boy, he's like you, Fred murmured. But no aliens. Something else. They didn't stay long. SUVs were back, 20 miles behind, moving fast. They drove through a thunderstorm that erased GPS signals. Helped a couple whose car had twisted sideways on a flooded farm road. Shared food, brief words. Vanished again. We are not miracles, Fred said, but sometimes we're mistaken for them. Chapter 37, The Town Without a Name. Fred and Ellis stepped over the faded road line that signaled arrival if you knew how to read it. The trees thinned into a clearing shaped like a question left unanswered. Gravel scattered like punctuation. The town existed like a rumor. No signs. No markers. Just stillness. The street that didn't age. The general store sagged politely under the weight of time, wooden slats browned by a century of weather, windows rippled with original glass. The gas station beside it had one pump, green enamel, flaking, a lever mechanism so old it may have pumped more memories than fuel. 2 cars sat parked on the dirt shoulder. One a Studebaker champion, its chrome smiling despite dust. The other a Chevy Bel Air, pale blue, pristine. No drivers. No movement. The sidewalk felt like it never expected feet again, but Fred and Ellis walked it anyway, toward the diner. The Not Diner Diner. The sign above the door read, Eat, just eat. No neon. No hours. Inside, 8 booths, 12 stools, one jukebox that flickered occasionally but never played. They sat. The waitress appeared, middle-aged, hair pinned back, apron starched with precision that defied time. She didn't ask what they wanted. She simply said, "It'll be ready when it's ready." Fred nodded. Ellis blinked twice. She didn't seem surprised to see them, but also didn't seem to care. She poured coffee. The mugs were warm before they touched the table. The SUV blind spot. Outside town, 6 black vehicles idled. Agents checked maps, scanned coordinates, examined electromagnetic signatures. None of it worked. The road didn't just end at the T-junction. It looped. Any attempt to enter rerouted them back 2 miles west. One agent thought he'd made it in, but his camera showed trees on repeat. Same branch bending, same crow flying a circle. Who are these people? Fred sipped once. They don't feel us. Ellis nodded slowly. Not because they don't notice. Because they don't process. The waitress looked up. Her eyes didn't reflect the overhead light. Where what happens when places go unclaimed. When they're too forgotten to fade. She gestured around without moving her hands. We remember differently here. You'll feel it soon enough. Fred considered asking how long she'd lived there. But he knew the answer wouldn't be in years. It'd be in loops. Chapter 38. The Church at the End. Fred chewed slowly. Just a burger, ordinary, griddled, served on a soft bun with a slice of melted cheese and a pickle pressed like punctuation. But today, he tasted it. Not just the salt. Not just the crisp edge of the fries. He tasted experience. For the first time since his return, flavor registered not as data, but emotion, memory folded into molecules. The meat held echoes of summer grill smoke. The coffee whispered of laughter and long drives past lakes. Ellis noticed. He didn't say anything, but he watched Fred take slow bites with eyebrows slightly raised. First time in a while, he asked softly. Fred nodded. First time I've wanted to eat since I came back. The unpriced town. The waitress returned, apron immaculate, hair unchanged by time. She handed them a paper check, handwritten in pencil. 2 burgers. Fries shared. 2 coffees total, $3.50. No tax. No gratuity line. No digital scanner. No tap. No beep. Fred smiled and handed her a $10 bill. She accepted it without counting, folded it once, and slid it beneath a porcelain ashtray. No receipt. No cash register noise. Outside, the street was still empty. The sun sat high overhead. No clouds. No wind. Yet everything felt hushed like a paused song. Down the road stood a small church, pale white clapboards weathered with care. Its steeple leaned slightly, like it had eavesdropped on one too many confessions. The doors were wide open. Fred squinted. The glass in the windows shimmered with colors that didn't belong to stained glass, more like refraction, as if the building filtered time. The invitation without words. Ellis didn't speak. Fred stepped off the diner stoop. They walked slowly. No one else moved. No doors opened. No birds flew. Yet it didn't feel abandoned. It felt watched. The church wasn't asking them to come in. It was simply making space. And Fred knew, whatever they found inside, it would not be prayer, not ritual, not sermon. It would be truth disguised as silence. Chapter 39. The Communion of Memory. They walked side by side, boots echoing softly on cracked pavement. 2 silhouettes against the hushed gunslingers without guns, warriors of thought. The church loomed, sun-bleached and brittle with time. They climbed the steps like it was instinct, like they'd done it before, in another life. Inside, by the altar, stood a man who had outlived seasons, wars, eras. He was age itself, draped in robes not woven from cloth, but from wisdom. His eyes held Ian's. His spine curved with the weight of knowledge. His hands never moved. His lips never parted. Yet he greeted them, all the same. The unspoken sermon. The priest's welcome came not in speech, but in visions. A dust storm rolling over prairie land, Ellis recognized his grandfather's shoes in the sand. Fred saw a woman's face, not one he knew, but one who knew him. Wars echoed without violence. Joy danced without celebration. Cities breathed without smog. They sat in the front pew. The church didn't echo silence, it amplified it. Each breath carried centuries. Each blink rewound clocks. Their minds were open books, and the preacher read them. In return, he offered his own stories, parables encoded in memory. What they learned. Over 4 hours, they bore witness to truths unspoken. The world was never broken. It was just misinterpreted. Every act of cruelty stemmed from fear trying to look brave. Love was not a candle, it was the flame itself, stolen and rekindled across generations. People do not change, they remember who they once were and choose to forgive that version. They understood time was not a line. It was a spiral, and this place, this preacher, sat at its center. They came seeking answers. They left with questions shaped like clarity. Outside, the sky hadn't shifted. But they had. Fred carried no new facts, but he carried new weight. Ellis smiled differently, wider, but softer. The street remained empty. But the church was still watching. Still remembering. And somewhere inside them, the preacher still spoke. Chapter 40. The Stillness Before West. Dusk draped the town in velvet shades of violet and smoke. Fred and Ellis, still humming with the silent communion of the church, walked quietly to the edge of town. No road signs. No fences. Just scrub brush, rusting fence wire, and the open breath of land. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Tonight wasn't for motels or inns or beds with numbers. It was earthbound. The same as always. The campsite ritual. They found their spot nestled between tall grass and an abandoned grain silo. The land felt familiar, like it had cradled weary travelers before. Fred raised his hand, fingertips brushing the air. The temperature shifted subtly, imperceptibly to anyone else, but enough for comfort. The air grew warmer, drier. Dew would not settle here tonight. The aliens hadn't just taught him how to manipulate climate, they'd taught him respect for it. Ellis unrolled the sleeping gear with practiced grace. He didn't ask for warmth. He simply knew Fred would provide it. A fire wasn't needed. The stars blinked on each one like a punctuation mark in the story above. Passage avoided. At some point in the night, 2 SUVs rolled along the edge of vision. Not fast. Not reckless. Just deliberate. The headlights sliced briefly through branches, then turned sharply away, avoiding the town like it were cursed or sacred. Fred watched without rising. Ellis, barely stirring, whispered, "Someone knows." Fred nodded. She had tracked them from Killam. She wouldn't lose them now. Silence between. A shadow blinked across the screen, a blip, a skipped beat. Not in the trees. Not in the terrain. It was in the data. The feed from Ellis' truck pulsed once, then scattered, low-frequency scatter across the boreal edge of Ontario. Marin caught it from her rooftop in Killam, boots propped against the rusted railing, blanket cinched tight. The signal was faint. Weak. Not enough to track with precision, but plenty to know they were on the move again. She leaned into her monitor, fingers finding the old keys like muscle memory. She rerouted her filters to intercept the surveillance drone relays near Sudbury, masking her reach with fake farm telemetry. A fresh packet came through, encrypted in a sloppy, brute-coded hash. Fred style. The man never used finesse when brute force would do. Marin didn't follow the vehicles. She circled their patterns remotely, feeding anomalies into a custom visualizer that painted their trail like constellations, dots connected by instinct. Her presence wasn't felt in the trees. It rippled in the metadata, invisible but incessant. Constant. Careful. Like ink rewriting the margins, digitally, precisely, never physically. Eyes on west. By dawn, camp broke easily. No lingering. No farewells. The town had given what it could, and now it was behind them, both geographically and spiritually. Fred looked west. Not for escape. Not for pursuit. But for continuation. They didn't know what waited in that direction, only that it waited for them. Chapter 41. Smoke over Yellowknife. Yellowknife loomed quiet and pale beneath a sky layered in polar haze. As Fred and Ellis pulled into the northern outskirts, neither spoke. The silence wasn't mutual, it was tactical. The kind of silence that came when the air felt too clean, too scrubbed. Ellis scanned the roadside. They've cleaned this path. No digital residue. No leftover drift. Fred grunted. So either we're late, or way too early. Their arrival had been coordinated through buried threads in Marin's network. Signal fragments passed from repeater towers near Hay River. The meeting was set inside a shuttered community radio station, once the heartbeat of stories and song. Now it smelled of dust, cedar, and memory. Inside, 3 elders from the Deliine, Gwich'in, and Dog Rib bands sat waiting. No names were exchanged, not out of secrecy, but reverence. Introductions were for strangers. Fred and Ellis were not strangers. Not anymore. Each elder carried a thread of the oral tapestry. They spoke not of history, but of memory that refused paper. Tales of northern lights gone black, of paths marked only by absence, and of a traveler who matched Fred's build and shadow, but existed before memory could be measured. Mid-conversation, Ellis's sat phone buzzed violently. Not a call. A burst ping. He leaned in. Drone scout. Low. Hot signature. They're circling. Fred reacted fast. Outside, he triggered a distorted heat flare using a modified ground tarp soaked in rabbit scent and thermal spray. The drone swerved, confused by the mimic, then disappeared behind a rocky outcrop. A splash marked its demise. The elders never flinched. Your path isn't new, one of them said. It's just reopened. 2 days later, Fred and Ellis joined a rescue effort. A bush plane had vanished near Whitefish Lake. Weather was already turning feral, wind howled like a language no one spoke anymore. Trees split. Radios died. Fred and Ellis moved on instinct, not maps. They found the plane wreckage tangled beneath a fallen pine ridge. Survivors clung to heat packs and each other. One held a carved Tuchone glyph. They'd been there 3 weeks, kept alive by fire, snowmelt, and the stubborn belief that someone would still come. Ellis spotted the SUVs first. 3. Again. Speeding too cleanly through terrain meant to slow. Fred diverted them with a decoy route, lighting an abandoned tracker beacon near a long-dead mine shaft. The shadows turned. Misled. Again. At Haines Junction, healing came in the form of shared stew, hushed prayers, and quiet celebration. But the stories didn't stop. Elders from the Métis, Tuchone, and Han bands gathered beneath the aurora. One Han matriarch, eyes clouded with ancient sorrow, spoke softly. Long ago, one walked the north like frost, never settling, never forgotten. He looked like you, traveler. And he vanished. Ellis met Fred's gaze. For a moment, neither moved. Later, while heading toward Alaska, their truck was flagged by 2 teens near the Yukon border. No threats. Just bewilderment. You were in our dream, one whispered. You said something about Lou Field. What's Lou Field? Fred started to speak. Ellis stopped him. Dreams don't ask questions, he said. They only echo. Chapter 42, Shadows Before Dawn. They had crossed the ghost of the Alaskan border just hours ago. No fanfare, no flashing signs. Just the vast stillness of northern British Columbia, a wilderness so quiet it seemed to listen. Fred and Ellis found a gravel pull-off near an old logging road, nestled beside a lake shaped like an arrowhead. The air was pine-sweet and brisk. A flickering campfire cast nervous silhouettes against the tense nylon walls. But the quiet was a lie. 2:47 a.m., the approach. A whisper passed through the forest. Not wind. Not animal. Something deliberate. 2 matte black SUVs, their engines modified for near silence, crawled into the clearing like predators. Inside, for agents, faces pale with entitlement, eyes hollowed by protocol. They wore adaptive pursuit suits, gear rumored to block thermal detection and bend ambient light. They didn't speak, didn't signal. They'd locked onto Fred and Ellis using technology Marin had never seen, electromagnetic pulse sniffers, quantum ID scramblers, gear that shouldn't exist yet. Ellis stirred in the tent. Fred already sat upright outside. One agent raised a silenced rifle. The shot heard nowhere. The round tore through nylon and bone before Ellis could fully open his eyes. Direct hit. Forehead. No ricochet. No sound. Fred blinked. For a moment, the world seemed paused. Then time surged forward. He dove, grabbing the tent pole, yanking it down, tumbling backward over a log. 2 rounds missed his chest by inches. Sparks rained from the fire. Fred's hand found the object. A small curved disc Ellis had swiped from a lab in Fort Yukon, never tested, believed inert. Fred smashed it into the earth. The clearing convulsed. Marin's awakening. In Killam, Marin's rooftop systems lit up in madness. An electromagnetic quake rippled across sensors. 17 silent alarms activated. Her deep pattern array began drawing human shapes from static. "Ellis," she whispered. But the image didn't stabilize. She saw Fred blurred, rushing, surrounded by collapsing data fields. Ellis's signature splintered outward, appearing in multiple places at once, as if death had fractured his existence. Something was deeply, cosmically wrong. Marin didn't know if Ellis had died or become distributed. The bureaucrat's creed. The lead agent, gray-haired, chin-scarred, stepped over Ellis's body. He opened a red laminated binder, lips mouthing the clauses like scripture. Subsection 8C, anomalous targets. Authorized lethal response under preemptive fear clause. Fred, covered in ash and pine needles, rose slowly. Ellis wasn't anomalous. Just human. The agent smiled. Cold. Humanity's no longer the point. He raised the weapon again, then froze. His muscles locked. His pupils dilated unevenly. Fred hadn't moved. But around him, gravitational distortion occurred. The object, no longer inert, had activated something from Ellis's final moment. Agents faltered. One dropped to his knees. Another fired, but the bullet spun midair like caught in a whirlpool. Escape into silence. Fred didn't fight back. He ran. Straight into the trees. Past the creek. Across jagged stone. The forest helped. Branches bent. Soil softened. Shadows misled. By the time the agents regrouped, Fred was gone. And Ellis's body? It shimmered. Once. Twice. Then vanished. Leaving behind only the tent, the fire, and the splintered logic of men who believed themselves gods. Chapter 43. The Gravity of Restraint. Fred moved like thunder inside a glass bottle. He didn't speak as he packed. Didn't bury Ellis. Didn't curse the agents. But the space around him bent. Descent through wrath. He crossed into southern BC by noon, a battered rental SUV weaving through mountain switchbacks. His eyes held 2 storms. One for Ellis's death. One for the insult of bureaucracy used as a weapon. He'd learned too much during his time on Earth. How power was often exercised not with wisdom, but with fear dressed as policy. Fred had access to technology that could fracture concrete with a whisper. But he wouldn't use it. Not yet. He passed roadside checkpoints where agents stared too long but said nothing. Their scanners flickered. Their radios whispered his name, but couldn't place it. Marin's search expands. Back in Killam, Marin slept beside wires and readouts. Ellis's echoes defied physics. His biometric pulse now appeared near Nova Scotia, then again near Whitehorse. Marin suspected Fred hadn't just activated the object. He'd triggered Ellis's resonance field. Ellis wasn't quite gone. He'd become observable only in the margins. Marin began to sketch what she saw, fractals shaped like eyes, patterns resembling thoughts. Fred's trajectory pointed to Washington State, where old contact sites had been hidden decades ago. And where Ellis once joked they should settle with a food truck selling vegan tacos and alien truth. A lesson left unlearned. Fred kept driving. And everywhere he stopped, small diners, mountain gas stations, quiet overlooks, people whispered about strange visitors and missing agents. The government had begun spinning Ellis's death into a narrative of threat. Anomalous behavior. Preemptive neutralization. Fred read between the lines. It wasn't fear of Ellis. It was fear of what he represented, a world not built on control. His choice. He could end them. One burst from the object would flatten 10 command centers. He could release truths that would unravel human institutions like wet paper. But Fred had decided he would not retaliate with violence. Instead, he would gather every whisper, every distortion, and let Earth's own people see what was done. He would become the mirror they couldn't unlook from. And somewhere deep in Washington, someone already knew he was coming. Chapter 44. The Invitation Rejected. Fred didn't arrive for glory. He arrived because he believed, for one last moment, that those at the levers of Earth's future might be capable of listening. The summit in the state capitol was billed as a turning point for global strategy, where the great minds of politics, defense, and science were meant to chart a new direction together. Fred came not as a messenger, but as a bridge between worlds. His entrance was met with confusion. Not awe. Not reverence. Just disdain. The cold welcome. As Fred stepped through security, protocols failed. Not due to sabotage, but because his presence could not be computed by their systems. He walked past scanners that flickered like dying stars. Inside, delegates whispered like children behind closed doors. He has no credentials. He wasn't scheduled. This is an unauthorized breach. A security aide approached Fred cautiously, speaking through an earpiece. "Sir, you'll need to come with us." Fred didn't resist. He walked calmly toward the heart of the gathering, toward a podium flanked by flags and fragile egos. The final plea. Fred stepped to the microphone. It shorted out. So he spoke without it. "I come with the last opportunity your world will be given. The galactic community has watched you struggle, invent, destroy, and love from distances you cannot measure. We debated. We waited. But time is now brittle and the question remains, will you join or will you rot alone?" His voice wasn't booming, but it resonated like thunder wrapped in wind. "I offer understanding, cooperation, advancement beyond your deepest dreams. But only if you listen. Not with ambition. Not with suspicion. But with courage." Rejection dressed as arrogance. What Fred received in response was not concern. It was revulsion. One delegate, a defense minister, stood and barked, "This is delusional. The man is diseased. He's a hazard to diplomatic operations." Another chimed in, "This summit is for serious negotiations, not fairy tales." A medical team was summoned. Security closed in. But none could lay a hand on Fred. The air around him distorted, quietly but unmistakably. Their weapons locked. Their bodies froze mid-step. Fred turned slowly, disappointment dripping from every movement. "You are so drunk on hierarchy, you've confused it with truth. Exit from illusion." He stepped down from the stage. Not removed. Not escorted. He walked out because it no longer mattered. The delegates scrambled, arguing, gasping, issuing orders to no one who could follow them. Above the building, the sky rippled. A ship hovered, cloaked in refraction, watching. Fred looked up once, then back at the building. Those in power cannot lead if they cannot listen. He vanished not into light, but into purpose. The summit continued. Papers flew. Declarations made. But every declaration now felt hollow. Because Fred had spoken not to their egos, but to what they once could have been. Chapter 45. The Sky Above Silence. Fred stepped out from the cold marble corridors of rejection and into a night sky that shimmered, if only for him. Above the city, hidden in a folded layer of space, just beyond ordinary perception, they hovered. Sleek. Silent. Watching. The alien ship pulsed like a heartbeat made of stars, its surface liquid and mirrorless, shifting with intelligence no Earth engineer could even guess at. Invisible to cameras. Undetectable by radar. But not to Fred. He knew them. Not by name, names were too small. By mission. They were here. Not to conquer. Not to bless. They were waiting. Waiting for Fred's final verdict. Was Earth ready? The forest refuge. Fred moved quickly, no lights, no noise, no interference. past the suburbs, beyond the grid, into the woods, dark and steady. It was almost 1 a.m. when he reached the clearing he'd used once before, an ancient grove where compasses spun and birds whispered things they didn't know. He stepped into the circle, sat cross-legged, and began the signal. Not technology, not words, just intention. The world around him shifted. The wind stopped. A deer paused mid-step. Trees leaned slightly inward, like audience members at the edge of revelation. Eyes on the road. Black SUVs prowled nearby. Highway patrol. Surveillance ops. The bureaucrats had leveled up, better tracking gear, faster thermal sensors, whispers of a new department designed for anomaly containment. But none of them entered the forest. They reached the turnoff and turned away. Not by choice, but because something around Fred now bent reality with precision. Every vehicle within 5 miles pinged false GPS data. Drones stalled mid-flight. Cell networks rerouted around the clearing like water around stone. They didn't know they were being blocked. They thought they'd gone off course. Marin's flicker. On her rooftop in Killam, Marin jolted awake. Every instrument lit, wild with low-frequency surges, cosmic static, and pattern distortions never mapped before. She scrambled to triangulate. The signals pulsed outward like heartbeat echoes through space-time. Washington State. Within 50 miles of the capital. Fred, she whispered, is this it? But she didn't have coordinates. Only evidence of enormity. She activated a deep scan, routed power from Camrose's industrial lines. Still, no precise lock. Fred had vanished from systems. Only the ripples remained. Fred's focus. Back in the forest, Fred concentrated. The aliens hadn't contacted him through speech. They reached him through thought resonance, shared emotional memory. He delivered his answer. They are clever, but arrogant. They create laws and mistake them for ethics. They reward power and punish wisdom. They fear what they do not control. He paused. But they love. And they dream. And some still listen. The leaders won't change. But the people, they might. A presence stirred in the sky, lightless and vast. Fred knew the message was received. Chapter 46. The Message. Fred stood alone in the clearing, the alien ship pulsing invisibly overhead in an alternate frequency of existence. The night bent around him. Trees leaned slightly inward. Even time seemed to hesitate. The directive came not as words, but as impression, an emotional command transferred through deep resonance. If they will not hear you from thrones, speak from below. If leaders will not receive light, offer it to those in the shade. Fred understood. He closed his eyes and raised his left hand, not to the sky, but to the network woven into it. Satellites began to shimmer softly. Microwave pathways bent and rerouted. He composed his message in thought, each concept layered with truth, each line emotionally encoded to pierce bias and fear. Then he triggered the transmission. Within 0.02 seconds, every phone lit up. Every tablet and computer blinked to black, then displayed Fred. His face, his voice, his message instantly translated into every known language, including dialects considered extinct. People of Earth, you now stand at a threshold long watched from beyond. An invitation has been extended, not from invaders, but from neighbors. A society of intergalactic peace, science, longevity, and mutual understanding. You are offered technology you do not yet dream of. Medical cures that end suffering. Tools to reverse environmental decay. Security against threats beyond your skies. All you must do is choose. Then, one prompt appeared. Do you accept? With one button, agree. Chapter 47. Silence speaks first. The aliens watched from orbit, not hungrily, not hopefully, just observantly. Fred waited. 1 minute. 5. 12. Then 30. In 3 hours, only 302 individuals clicked agree. Many users swiped past it as an ad, assumed it was a prank, called it foreign propaganda. Some governments blocked it in real time. Others issued statements denouncing it as psychological warfare. Fred sat motionless beneath the tree canopy. He didn't feel disappointment. He felt confirmation. This world, its leaders drunk on power, its citizens trained to distrust wonder, had been given truth and had chosen noise. He communed quietly with the ship above. He asked, "How much longer do we wait?" The answer came like wine through glass. "You have already waited longer than most would." Chapter 48, Departure. Fred stood slowly. He scanned the surrounding wilderness, the rustle of branches, the cold earth beneath his boots. A ripple in the air formed beside him, 7 feet across, like reality had been unzipped. The portal pulsed, humming with gravity logic and sky memory. Fred stepped toward it, then paused. He looked back. Not with sorrow, but deep disappointment. Not all were ready. Not all will be. But some might still be listening. And to them, I will return. He stepped through. The air sealed. The stars blinked once. Epilogue signal, Marin's dark hour. In Killam, Marin's entire rooftop rig went dark. Every instrument, every dial, every satellite link. Dead. Not fried. Not disrupted. Just vacated. Fred's biometric signature was gone, as if he'd never existed. Only one screen still functioned. It displayed a single line. 302, remember them. Epilogue addendum, orbiting judgment. Before the ship vanished fully into the folds of hyperdimensional space, one final task was executed. Silent, precise, permanent. A small obsidian beacon was deployed into Earth's orbit. No larger than a suitcase, but forged from elements unknown to terrestrial science. It rotated with impossible gravity resistance, locking into an orbital path invisible to all but the most advanced tracking systems. Its message was simple. Its message was damning. It broadcast in every known frequency used by interstellar civilizations. Warning, danger, no intelligent life. Approach with extreme caution. Council Edict number 27AN469. It pulsed every 6.2 seconds. Unyielding, unchanging. A cosmic keep-out sign to any species drifting close. And just beneath that transmission, layered beneath the alien frequencies, was a record. Fred's message. The number 302. The exact moment Earth chose silence. There was no vengeance in the beacon, only protection. For others. From us. End of episode 4. The thread was offered. The weave refused. But somewhere, in the quiet corners of Earth, 302 hearts still hum with possibility.